Good evening, Chevra. We are in lesson 2, and I mentioned last week that we'll see in the prep work how long whether we're going to do the Hakdamas Amalakid in 1 or 2 classes. After going through it, we're going to do it in 2 classes. We're going to split it in 2, and it's going to work as follows. The first half of the Hakdamas Amalakid, the introduction by the author, by the Alter Rebbe himself, is going to make the case, which is counterintuitive. It's going to make the case for why a book could never supplement a teacher. How writing a book like Tanya could never supplement the relationship between a Rebbe and a Chassid, between a Rav and a Talmud, between a Rosh Yeshiva and their student. And Alter Rebbe is going to go into great length to explain why you dafka need to have the personal relationship with a human being. Which seems, again, in an introduction to a book that is in some ways coming to step in to be the substitute for that personal relationship, it seems counterintuitive, but that's what the Alter Rebbe does, because when he does make the case, and we'll learn it next week, you're going to know all the reasons and all the excuses and all the logic for why a book like Tanya should never exist, and yet why the Alter Rebbe chose to write the book anyhow. And so, if you have a book in front of you, again, it's the Hakdamas Amalakid, where we left off last week. We're going to read it inside, and we're going to delve through it. It's I have to say that having learned Tanya many, many times, having preparing for class has allowed me to dig into a much, much deeper and enjoyable understanding of what the Alter Rebbe is offering here. So he starts off as follows. Hakdamas HaMalakid, the introduction, he doesn't call himself the author. It goes back to the discussion about humility that we spoke about last week. He calls himself the collector, the compiler, that he was collecting wonderful Jewish, Kabbalistic, Hasidic information that's good nourishment and it's good healing for the soul. But he doesn't see himself as an author, although, as we discussed last week, he very much was the author, although he does take the teachings of many great rabbis that came before him. But the way he elucidates it, the way he explains it, the way he extrapolates it, the way he gives us practical guidance for life, it's very much the Alter Rebbe's style. So he says, Higeres Hashlucha, this is a letter that I am sending, Leklolus Anshe Shlomenu, to the general Chabad community. We'll talk about what that means. Anshe Shlomenu, Anash, is normally a term used by Hasidic Jews for their particular community. Yishmere Yevarchem Tzurenu v'Yishmere, may our Creator, the one who formed us, bless them and protect them. So let's some more background is important here. Already in 1793, the Alter Rebbe was struggling with not being able to keep up with the amount of people that were seeking his guidance. It wasn't a game. He didn't have 52 gaboyim, 52 assistants that were protecting. He wanted to meet with every single Jew that needed his guidance, that wanted his guidance, that wanted to hear his teachings, both in Nigla the Torah, in the revealed parts of the Torah. Again, he was an author of a Shulchan Aruch, and in the Nister the Torah, the mystical, the esoteric teachings of Chassidus. And they also needed practical guidance in Avodas Hashem and how to serve God. He couldn't keep up, to the point that he wrote in a letter in 1793, I'm translating, he wrote, the great bitterness with which my life is literally embittered. I am too weary to bear the mental distraction and lost worship resulting from my thinking over these matters deeply in order to give a proper response. He writes that in a letter. So many people were coming to him with their ailments, with their spiritual issues, and he was taking each one of them seriously, as any rabbi should, any Rav, any Rosh Yeshiva, any Rebbe should, that it was taking a toll on him, to the point that he later wrote, and how many times do I truly despise my life at this level? Many times I decided in my heart to remove my dwelling from this country, meaning he figured if he could just move to Israel like his colleague and mentor, Reb Mendel of Vitebsk, and others, he'd free himself from this incredible burden of carrying and guiding the spiritual well-being of the Jews in all of Eastern Europe, even though more specifically it was Belarus and then Lithuania. So in that context, he writes a letter to the Chabad community, and although he uses the term Anshe Shleimenu, the truth is that because the Alter Rebbe made it clear, and the Rabbeim that followed made it clear, that Chassidus Chabad was meant for every single Jew, when the Alter Rebbe says that he's writing this letter to the Chabad community, in some sense that was literal, but also it also represented his general message to the world. And what his general message was is that despite what you may think, despite all the good reasons and logic that you may give to the fact that I should not write this book, and I'm going to actually help you understand why I kind of think you may be right that I shouldn't write this book, I'm still going to write it. And he's going to go on to explain why he's going to write it anyhow. But again, I think it shows the honesty and the transparency and the uniqueness of the Alter Rebbe, that instead of just saying, hey, I'm writing this sefer, this book, and now go learn it, he's not discounting the fact that some of, not more than some, that many of his Hasidim were struggling with the reality that their Rebbe is basically handing them over to a book. How can he do that? We need him. We don't want a book. We want a human being of flesh and blood that we can sit in front of and talk to and share our angst and share our pain and share our spiritual dilemmas and have him guide us in the right direction. Now he wants to hand us a book and say, sayonara. So he understood that. And he wanted to respond to that. And instead of sweeping it under the rug and making believe it's not an issue, or God forbid, like many other modern day Rebbes or Rosh Yeshivas, think that they're too important to address the reality of what their students and Chassidim are dealing with, the Alter Rebbe did not feel that way. The Alter Rebbe felt very much that he owes the Chassidim an explanation as to why he feels compelled that despite these challenges of putting into a book, it's the right thing to do at this time and this place in the trajectory of Jewish history and Hasidic history. So he goes as follows. Here he begins. Aleichem ishim ekra. To you, O men, I call. He's using a verse from Proverbs, from Mishlei. Shimu alai reitfei tzedek mevakshei Hashem. Listen to me, you who pursue righteousness and who seek God. The Yishma aleichem alekim, and God will listen to you. So he quotes a bunch of different verses from Proverbs, from Mishlei, and then from Yeshaya, from Isaiah, and then from Judges, from Shoftim. Lemigadol ve'ad katan, from the greatest to the smallest. Kol anshe shlomeinu d'minaseinu smuchizlan, all the members of our community. Meaning from, let's just say in the most practical sense, the Chabad community, in our land and its environment, so the neighboring lands as well. Ish al mekoyma yove v'sholim, each of whom shall go into their place in peace. So now he's giving them a little bit of a blessing. V'chayim ad oilam, with blessing of everlasting life. Netzach sela vod, forever and ever sela. Amen ken yiratzin, amen may be God's will. So first he says he gives them a bracha. May every one of them live peacefully. May they find their inner peace, and may they have a practical, peaceful life. And it's to you, to the good people of the world, says the Alter Rebbe, that I'm writing this introduction, because I want you to understand where I'm coming from, so that your grievances about the fact that I'm putting this into a book and how you want me more than the book should be, you could take a little chill and realize that I've thought it through and I know what I'm doing. So here he goes into explaining how there's two types of Jewish theology, Jewish philosophy books, and how we interact with them, and how in both cases doing it on your own without a rabbi, without a teacher, can be very, very complex. So he starts as like this. Hine mudas zois. Now this thing is known. That throughout our community it's common to for people to say that you can't compare hearing spiritual guidance from a living teacher in flesh and blood to seeing and reading in a book. So the Gemara says, the Talmud says, that visuals are much more powerful than audible. When you see something, it's not the same as hearing about it. If someone comes to you and says, Zalman, did you see that car crash yesterday? He says, no, I heard about it. Oh my, he says, if only you were there, if you would have seen what happened, my gosh, you wouldn't, right? Because when you see something, it's much more, the truth of it becomes much more internalized with who you are versus hearing about something. Here the Alter Rebbe is twisting that Talmudic statement and explaining it differently. He's saying the Jews would say that reading something in a book, in other words, you're seeing it in a book, is nothing close to hearing it directly from the teacher, from the master, from the Rebbe, from the Rosh Yeshiva directly. So I'm about to put out this book called Tanya from these manuscripts, and I also recognize that the world says, and I don't necessarily disagree, that when you hear it from a teacher face to face, it's not the same as reading it in a book. Furthermore, he says, when a person reads it in a book, you read it inevitably. It's not like you're doing it on purpose, but when you read something in a book, you're reading it subjectively through the lens of your own understanding. If you don't have a teacher there explaining it to you, what it means to you, it's very, very easy to interpret it subjectively. Which is a secondary, very important point, and according to the ability and grasp of his mind at the place where he is found. Not only is the learning subjective, but every person's brain capacity, every person's intellect is different. So you're going to sit down with a book of holiness, a book of Torah, a book of Jewish philosophy. You're going to take a Kuzari, a Chayvas Alavavas, you're going to take a Mesilas Yesharim, you're going to take a Sefer Chassidus, you're going to take any sefer that's there to guide you. And yes, the rabbi who wrote it may have great intentions and may have written it beautifully, but number one, you're going to perceive it subjectively based on who you are and what's going on in your life. And number two, not everyone's intellect is anywhere close to equal. Right? It's just the reality. I know in America you have to say everything's equality, but it's not. Some people are smarter than others. They perceive things, they comprehend things better than others. And if you hand them a book, there's no guarantee that they're going to understand it in the way the teacher meant to share it. Either because they're being subjective, they're biased, or because they don't have the capacity to understand it, or both. He goes further. He says, and if the reader's mind and opinions are confused, and when it comes to worship of God, he wanders about in darkness. So not only are you not necessarily the smartest person, and not only are you not necessarily objective, you're very much subjective, but the world is a chaotic world. Our brains are distracted. Our brains are all over the place. They float in places of darkness as well. That only with difficulty will he or she see the light that's good, that's hidden in the sacred books, even though the content of these books is sweet light to the eyes and healing for the soul. So you could read the most powerful, most beautiful, inspirational, guiding light in a holy book and fail at comprehending it in totality. Why? Because, first of all, you're subjective. Number two, you don't have the brain capacity. And even if you do, our brains are very much scattered and all over the place, and you won't know. Right? You can meet people. I do it as a shliach. I can tell you, you meet someone who's a PhD. They're brilliant. When it comes to spiritual matters, they have a very, very hard time comprehending it altogether. What if the guy has a PhD? You know what the guy can do in chemistry and algebra and trigonometry? How come when it comes to holy things and Torah things and spiritual things, they're struggling so much? Because it's a unique ability to study Torah and internalize it in a way that's accurate when your brain is distracted and it's traveling through places that a Jewish brain doesn't necessarily need to be traveling through, but that's creating a darkness that doesn't allow you to fully understand it. And if you think about it, what are you going to read in these books? You take out a book of Musar, you take out a book of Chassidus, it's going to talk about soul ailments, challenges in the soul, right? So you're going to start reading it, and you're going to say, okay, this doesn't apply to me, right? Because a person doesn't see themselves in the negative way. We always cover up. We always cover up on our own negativity. Human beings naturally try to see the beauty in themselves. They always see the negativity in other people. But in themselves, a person is negeh, or a person is very much subjective when it comes to their self. So if you don't see that you have a problem, there's no way you're going to find the medicine. There's no way you're going to find the spiritual healing in the book, because you're not even going to know that you're the one that has the problem. Actually, what happens most of the time, Alter Rebbe doesn't say this, I'm saying this, most of the time when you read a book about Musar and Chassidus, you figure out exactly what you want to tell your friend who needs it. Instead of saying that it's for me, it's for the other guy. Why? Because you're subjective, you're biased. A person loves himself so much or herself so much, that they don't even realize it. Therefore, the beautiful light that's embedded within Torah, the beautiful light that's embedded in Torah, including the light of Sheshis Yemei Bereshis, when God created the world in the 6 days of creation, He embedded creation with His hidden mystical light, and every time we connect with Torah, we have the ability to reveal some of that light, but you ain't going to find the light if you're not learning it properly, for one of the 3 reasons that he mentioned. Furthermore, he goes even further. He says, Ubar midein, and besides this concern, when texts of religious inspiration are based on human reasoning, they certainly won't have a universal appeal because the minds and attitudes of readers aren't alike. And what inspires and stimulates one mind won't inspire or stimulate another. So in addition to all of that, there's the basic reality of inspiration. Right? You ever learning a Gemara or a Maimer Chassidus or anything for that matter with a friend, with a chavrusa, and you look at this and you get on fire. Oh my! Look at this chap! Look at this vart! Look at this chiddush! Oh my! And your friend is looking at you like you fell from the moon. They read the same line. They read the same pshat in Torah. It didn't inspire them. Now, if a Rebbe or a Rosh Yeshiva was standing there and giving you the guidance face to face to each person individually based on who they are, of course it would be a different animal. So the Alter Rebbe is saying, before he gets to making the case for why he wrote it anyhow, he's telling you why you mamish can't compare writing a book as good as the book in the Sefer may be to actually having a Rosh Yeshiva or a Rebbe deal face to face with their Talmud, deal face to face with their chassid, with their student. He goes into a shtickle pilpul here about an interesting halacha based on the Gemara and Brachas. He says this, and I'm going to explain it to you. He says, as our sages have said in the Gemara, Bracha Chacham HaRazim al Shishim Ribim Yisrael. We know there's a bracha that you make when 600,000 Jews are in one place. It's Chacham HaRazim, which means, blessed are you Hashem, King of the universe, etc., who is wise in knowing secrets. Hashem is wise in knowing secrets. What's pshat? That in front of you is standing 600,000 Jewish people, each one, as the Gemara says, Kishem, she'ein de'yisein doimos zulazu, k'moi she'ein partzufeim doimos, that each person has their own unique way of perceiving and comprehending and intellectualizing. Just like they have 600,000, every person has a different face. There is no two equal faces. So too they have equal, there is no equal intellect. Everyone perceives things differently. So we have a special bracha, a special blessing in the Torah that we make when you see 600,000 people, because it gives you this incredible ability to say, wow, there were 600,000 adult males in the Midbar, in the desert, when the Jewish people left Mitzrayim, when they left Egypt, in our Torah portions that we're reading these weeks. So this number 600,000, when you see 600,000 unique Jews, and we know that each one of them has a unique intellect that's unique, and Hashem knows the secrets of each of them, that's worthy of a special bracha. Now, why does he bring it up here? So he says, he sends us off to the Milchames Hashem. Milchames Hashem is a sefer that the Ramban wrote, that Nachmanides Ramban wrote mostly to defend the teachings of Rabbi Yitzchak Elfasi, the Rif. The Rif wrote a commentary on the Gemara, a halachic composite, a halachic codification on the Gemara, and the Ramban, many, many decades later, came along and defended a lot of the theses, a lot of the ideas that the Rif wrote about. What does the Ramban say about the Rif regarding the end of the Gemara? Right? There's a Bracha Chacham HaRazim that we say for 600,000 people. What does the Gemara say right after that in Brachas? In Brachas Daf Nun Ches. What the Gemara says is as follows: Rav Papa and Rav Huna they were traveling on the road, and along the way, Rabbi Chanina met them. Rabbi Chanina said, seeing you guys is like seeing 600,000 Jews, so I'm going to say the bracha, Baruch, with Hashem's name, Chacham HaRazim. So even though there was no 600,000 people, the Gemara says that when Reb Chanina saw these two sages of Israel, he wanted to make the bracha Chacham HaRazim. Actually, lahalacha, In the final ruling, the Rambam says you could only make the bracha when there's actually 600,000 people there. But the fact that the Ramban, explaining the Rif, was willing to contemplate and entertain the idea that maybe we should be able to make the Bracha Chacham HaRazim not just when there's actually 600,000 people there, but when you meet a person that has the ability to discern the uniqueness of each person. In other words, they contain within themselves the ability of understanding 600,000 people. And in Rav Chanina's opinion, that was Rav Huna and Rav Papa. And that's why the Alter Rebbe says here in the introduction, the Pirush HaSifri Gabi Yeshua, right, regarding Yehoshua ben Nun, Joshua, who led the Jewish people into Israel, it says, Ish asher ruach boy. He's described in the pasuk, in the verse, as a man who has a spirit within him. Now, anyone that learns that verse in Joshua and Sefer Yeshua has a very basic question. What do you mean he had that Yeshua was a man of spirit within him? Every person has a spirit within him. What do you mean Yeshua is unique that he had a spirit within him, that he had a ruach? So the Sifri says, and I think Rashi quotes it actually in the Chumash, that Yeshua's uniqueness, that he had the ability, the talent to accommodate himself to the spirit of each individual. In other words, Yeshua could meet any Yid, no matter how different, and every Yid is different than the other one. Yeshua, as a leader of Klal Yisrael, as a Rebbe, was able to meet every Yid and directly connect with them personally and give them their path and give them their guidance based on who they were. So the Ramban, while explaining the Rif, is saying, you want to know why I think there's a possibility, even though la halacha that's not the case, but why I think it should be at least an option in halacha, that when you see a man, a tzaddik, a Rosh Yeshiva like Rav Huna, like Rav Papa, who are able to contemplate and understand and guide every single human being and get it. They get each person. I think it's worthy of contemplating. We should make a Chacham HaRazim on them as well, because it's a very unique gift to be able to guide people that way. So why is the Alter Rebbe giving us this whole Megillah about the Melchamas and the Rif and Yeshua ben Nun and the Chacham HaRazim? So what the Alter Rebbe is saying is, you can do all of that when there's a human being involved, face to face, giving guidance to the person so they can look at the person, see where they're at, see their mannerisms, see their broken heart, and give them guidance. But how could a book do that? You can't write a book and then interpret it 600,000 ways so that each person, you're writing one book. So how is every individual going to be able to open a Tanya and suddenly feel guided by a book that wasn't written particularly for their needs? By the way, I just want to, it's important as we go in to Tanya to make as a commercial message, that when the Alter Rebbe quotes this Gemara in Brachas, he says, She'ein da'yesem doimai zulazu v'chulu. Remember last week I said that the Alter Rebbe wrote the Tanya like Torah Shebechsav, where every letter was accurate. So how come sometimes it says v'chulu, sometimes it says chulu, which both mean etc. But sometimes it's with a vav, v'chulu, sometimes it's chulu, sometimes it's goimer, sometimes it's v'goimer. So there's and I saw one of you smiling because it's a good, like what's that? It's b'diuk, it's exact. The Gemara says in Brachos that you're not allowed to quote a pasuk without quoting the full pasuk, because you're breaking the pasuk. The loy paskin on Moshe. You can't make a new verse of the Torah. You have to make it clear, if you're going to quote Moses, to quote the entire thing. So when can you quote a verse without finishing it? You write v'goimer or goimer. Why once with a vav, once without? It depends if the rest of the verse or the rest of the Talmudic statement is relevant to the point that the Alter Rebbe is making. If the rest of the verse and if the rest of the Talmudic statement is relevant to the point the Alter Rebbe is making, he will say v'goimer. It's a continuation. We have to see what the rest says as well. Or v'chulu. But if it just says chulu or goimer, it's just there to tell you that there is an end to this verse. There is an end to this Talmudic statement, but the content of the rest of it isn't relevant to the point he's making. So even when there's a vav versus no vav, it's very accurate to how it's written. Now we can go back to the point Alter Rebbe is trying to make. And he says as follows. If you read a book of Jewish philosophy, right? Let's say some rabbi from Art Scroll today some rabbi or from Kahal sits down and writes a book to guide Jews how to deal with anger, or to guide Jews how to deal with temptation, or to guide Jews how to protect their eyes from seeing things they shouldn't see, shmiras einayim, or to guide Jews in how to deal with coveting, with being jealous. It's a nice book of Jewish philosophy. And even such a book is very hard for the student to contemplate because of all the reasons we mentioned above, that it's very hard to be objective. It's very hard not to be biased. It's very hard to comprehend what the teacher meant. And every person understands things differently. What about the holy books? What about the holy books that were written by divine intervention? They're called, he calls it here, Afilu B'Sifri Hayira Asher Yisedoisem Ba'arei Kodesh. The books, the texts of religious inspiration that have their foundation in the holy peaks. Right? And they are, for example, Medrashe Chachamenu Zichrein Levracha, the teachings of the sages of blessed memory, Asher Ruach Hashem Diber Bam Umilase Elishoinam, since the Spirit of God spoke through them, His word was their tongue, Vayiraisav Kuchabrichu Kulachad, and the Torah of the sages and God are totally one. So we know the famous teaching, I think it was the Baal Shem Tov who said, that all the sages until the Maharsha was Rav Shmuel Idlis. Rav Shmuel, the Maharsha was a commentary on the Gemara, was born in 1555 and he passed away on Hey Kislev, on the 5th day of Kislev in 1631. His mother was a cousin of the Maharal of Prague. His father was a great-grandchild, a descendant of Rabbi Yehuda Chassid. And he passed away, he's buried in Ostrov, in what's today in Ukraine, about 4 hours away from Kiev in Ostrov. God knows what's going on in that part of the world right now, but that's where the Maharsha is buried. So the Baal Shem Tov said that everyone until the Maharsha taught their Torah, wrote their Torah with divine providence, with Ruach HaKodesh. So you open up a holy book that exists from way back when, and it's officially direct intervention. It's a Raisav Kuchabrichu Kulachad. These Torah teachings are one with God. Shouldn't they be able to inspire me? Shouldn't they be able to guide me in my spiritual dilemmas, in my temptations, in my issues? Furthermore, he says, and we know that all the 600,000 souls roots in Israel, their division and subdivision, right? We have this teaching in Kabbalah and Shara Gilgulim from Chaim Vital, that there were 600,000 what we call stem souls, neshamas klolius. And all the other neshamas that we are, most of us today, all of us today, are offshoots of those stem cells. Each one of those stem cells resulted in many, many other miniature souls that came down to be the life force of people. So if that's the case, he goes even further. He says, even down to the soul spark within the most irreverent and non-holy or non-spiritual Jew amongst the Jews, they are all deeply connected to the Torah, and the Torah connects them deeply with God, the Blessed Holy One, as it says in the Zohar. So seemingly, if you take a real holy book, a Medrash, a Zohar, something that was from before the Maharsha, and you start learning it, it should be able to guide you because you're connected to it. Every soul is connected to the Torah. He says, but hold your horses. Again, this is the pragmatic side of the Alter Rebbe. He says there is a derech close to close Yisrael. These are general principles for the whole Jewish people, which means, yes, it's true. Everyone has an aspect in Torah. We say in Sheyibana, Beis Hamikdash B'meira v'yameinu, may God rebuild the temple speedily in our days. V'sein chelkeinu v'soirasecha, and give us our portion. Chelkeinu v'soirasecha. What do you mean our portion in the Torah? We have a portion in the Torah. Yes. Every Jew has a connection to the Torah. So seemingly, I should be able to take out a Torah, a holy book, a Medrash, a Zohar, or something, and find my answers right there. And by the way, I've had people come to me and say that to me. Why do I need a Rebbe? Why do I need Chassidus? I could just open up a Chumash and get my answers. It's a good question. Alter Rebbe is addressing that question right here in the introduction. If every Jew has a connection in the Torah, do I really need a Rosh Yeshiva? Do I need a teacher? I need a Magachir? Do I need a Rebbe? Why? What do I need it for? Why don't I just go to the Torah? I could skip all these intermediary people that are getting in the way and go straight to God. He says, yeah, it's very nice. Everyone has a chelik in Torah. But how are you going to find your chelik in Torah? Who's going to help you find it? What, are you going to just do a hocus pocus? You're going to do a random raffle to figure out which part of Torah is yours? And for most people, it's very, very hard to know which chelik is yours in Torah. And he says, and even though the Torah was given, it's not a closed text. The Torah, it's open, right? We say, Kol Masha Talmud Vasik Asid B'Chadish. When every Torah, Talmud Chacham comes along and is B'Chadish, a novelty in Torah, we say, Nitna L'Moshe Misinai. It's included in the Yud Gimel Midas. It's included in the 13 ways of extrapolating Torah teaching, and therefore it's Mamish Torah. And if that's the case, why do I need any of this? I could just have it in the Torah. It's connected to each individual soul amongst Klal Yisrael that has roots in it. But the Alter Rebbe says something so simple. Not every person merits to identify his own unique location in the Torah, to figure out which part of the Torah is most directed to me. Of course, everyone's mechuyev, everyone's obligated to fulfill all mitzvahs that are connected to them. We don't want people that are not a kohen to do the mitzvahs for kohenim. We don't want people that are not yibamas to do levirate marriage, to do yibum if they're not meant to have a yibum. We don't want people to do mitzvahs outside of Eretz Yisrael if they're not that are meant for Eretz Yisrael when they're not in Israel. But even within the mitzvahs that are connected to us, you have to do every mitzvah. But how do you know which chelik is yours? Which portion of the Torah is mostly connected to your mission in this world if you don't have someone guiding you? So the Alter Rebbe is saying, whether it's philosophical books of Judaism or the holy super duper books of Judaism, it's very hard, close to impossible, to read it in a book and get your answers, which makes the question even stronger. Why would he write a book like Tanya, expecting people to be able to get the answers and guidance of what their questions are, if it's so hard to do so? And then before he wraps up this part of the Akdama, this part of the introduction, he goes even one step further. He says, even in the case of the legal halachas, the legal discussions concerning what is permissible and what's forbidden, what's usher and what's mutter, which are matters that are very much open, we're revealed to us and our children. Right? All of us can open up a Shulchan Aruch, a code of Jewish law, open up a Rambam, and open up a Tur, open up a Shach and a Taz and a Bach, and you know what the halach is. And yet there's big arguments. We've seen that the sages, the Mishnaic sages, the Tanoim and the Amorayic sages, the Talmudic sages, they argue from one extreme to the next. This guy says it's 100% kosher, and this one says it's 100% treif. Right? There's no uniformity. Of course, there's uniformity in how we act. There's halacha, there's a psak, and that's what we do. But in the discussions in the study hall, we rip each other apart in the study hall. From one, and even the great sages did that from one extreme to another. You know, they say about a guy, a Rav who paskin, he made a ruling against the psak din of the shach. So they said to him, "You're not scared to have a psak against the shach?" He said, "What's going to happen? I'll come to Bezdin Shomayim, I'll come to the heavenly court. I'll have to have it in Torah with the shach. I'd rather have it in Torah with the shach than have it in Torah with the ox that we were arguing about, the shoyer, the animal that we were arguing about with the kosher and the non-kosher." In other words, we have to choose our battles. But in the realm of the study hall, there's very much battles, and to figure out spiritually, you know, they say about the Beis Yosef, Rabbi Yosef Karo, the author of the Shulchan Aruch, he was a student of the Ramak, of Rabbi Shekar, the great Kabbalist, who's buried in Tzfas. And when the Ramak passed away, he went to learn by the Arizal, by Rabbi Isaac Luria, by the Arizal HaKadosh, by Ari HaKadosh. And the Ari said, "You're not for me. We're not a good match." Does that mean Rabbi Yosef Karo was one of the most incredible Talmidei Chacham that the Jewish people ever had? He was. He just wasn't a good match for the Ari. Similarly, by the way, Moshe Alshich, the great Alshich, who lived in Tzfas, who wrote an incredible Torah commentary, he also went to learn by the Arizal. The Arizal said, your realm is drush. Your realm is to go teach, right? There's 4 ways of learning Torah. Pshat, Remez, Drush, and Soid, which is the simple understanding, the basic understanding. There's the hints of Torah, the secrets of Torah. Then there's the Hamalitical, the Drush, and then there's Soid, the esoteric, the mystical. The Arizal told the Alshich, your realm is drush, you should go teach the Hamalitical, you should go learn the Hamalitical. The realm of Kabbalah is not so much for you. It's complicated to find your place in Torah, and we see that specifically because even in Nigla the Torah, even when it comes to Halacha and Gemara and Shulchan Aruch, we have such heavy-duty arguments from one extreme to another between the Shach and the Taz, and Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel and Abaya and Rava. If in the realm of open, revealed Torah, there's so many differences, and even though we say ve'elu divrei Elokim chayim, that they both come from the source of God, and by the way, the word Elokim is God's name as it relates to nature in the sense that it's in the plural. It's a name. Elokim is plural, and chayim, elu ve'elu divrei Elokim chayim. These are the words of a living God. The word chayim is also plural. It's not chay, it's chayim. Which means that at Matan Torah, the giving of the Torah, when it says, the Maharshal says that at Matan Torah, God gave the Torah in 49 channels, spiritual channels of understanding. Which means there were Jews that were standing next to each other at Matan Torah. They were both getting the same Torah, the same Gilui, the same revelation from God, and yet one understood it this way, one understood it that way, because there's different channels of perception. And they're all holy, even though there's only one psak halacha, but there's different ways to understand things. And this claim kepeldik, this narrow-minded way of thinking that my way is the highway, because my Rav told me that, but the other guy's Rav told him something else. He's not a bad person. He's following his Rav. He's following a path of Torah. Again, not when it comes to psak halacha, but when it comes to hashkafa, to worldview, how a Jew sees things, or different minhagim, different Jewish customs. There's different paths within Torah, and they're all true, because an infinite God has room for more than one. The Chassidus says that every one of the Tanoim and the Amoraim, every one of the Talmudic and Mishnaic sages had a unique connection with a particular sphera in the spheres Lamaila, right? There's 10 spheres. There's 10 divine emanations in the heavenly abodes, starting with Chachma, with wisdom, and then Bina, understanding, and Das, and knowledge, and then Chesed, kindness, and Gvura, severity, Tiferes, glory, harmony. Tiferes, harmony, Hoid, glory, etc. So each one of the Tanoim and Amoraim, and even each Rav and each person today is connected to a particular sphera. So, for example, Hillel was connected to Chesed, which is why he was more kind and more lenient, if you wish. Beis Shammai was very much from Gvura, which is why he was a little more strict. When the convert came to convert, Shammai threw him in a masa binyan. He sent him packing. Not because Shammai was a bad guy or because he had anger management problems. God forbid, he's Shammai. He threw him because he saw the world of Torah, he saw the world of Yiddishkeit through a Gvura perspective, which is a valid form of Yiddishkeit. I'm not sure it works in today's day and age with most people, because we're in a very sensitive generation. And if you're in a sensitive generation, using Gvura doesn't necessarily work. You have to be more merciful, more kind. But it's a valid path. So if, when it comes to halacha, to nigla the Torah, to the revealed parts of the Torah that are simple to understand and debate, we see such a disparity, such a division, such a different opinions from one opinion to the other. Which generally we divide it into three categories. There's the Chesed, Gvura, Tiferes, which is the right, the left, and the center. Chesed is on the right, Gvura is on the left, and the center is Tiferes, harmony. And generally in halacha, that's what you'll see. And he says, when Chesed, and the souls that are rooted in the attribute of Chesed, they tend to be lenient in their legal decisions, being inclined towards generosity. By the way, there is obviously a few times in the Gemara where Shammai was Mekel and Hillel was Machmir. Shammai was more lenient and Hillel was more severe, more stringent. And the reason that happened is because we know that all the spheres are beiskalos. All the divine attributes have some level of intertwined. They're interconnected. So once in a while, it manifests itself that way as well. But as a general rule, we see such a difference from one opinion to the other. And that's all with the revealed part of the Torah. Says the Alter Rebbe, this is how he wraps up the first half of the introduction, Akdamas HaMalaket. How much more so, when and far greater, when it comes to the hidden things that are for God, our God. The inun tchilu rechimu d'v'moichel liba. What does that mean? Reverence and love of God in the brain and heart. Each individual according to his own capability. So when it comes to issues related to the heart, and it comes to issues related to the brain, how much more so when it comes to our spiritual development? There is no one way. There's many, many paths. Within a healthy Jewish experience, there are many, many Jewish paths for how you can serve Hashem. So how are you going to put this in a book? How am I about to write a book when it's clear from everything we've read for the last 40 minutes that a book can't do it? You need the personal touch from the rabbi, from the teacher, from the Rebbe, from the Rosh Yeshiva. He needs to be able to see you and guide you in particular in your unique path. You can't be there as a guy reading a book who's subjective, who's biased, who doesn't have the brain capacity, who's distracted, he's living in a place of darkness. You need to be able to have clarity. I can't even tell you how many times a day people, including super religious people, say to me, Rabbi, I need clarity. They say, Chaim Shol, can you help me? I'm trying to figure out this issue. I need clarity, and my rabbi won't give me clarity. Yesterday, I got a call from a Chabad Shliach somewhere far, far away from Montana. 18-hour flight from Montana. He says, you seem like a guy that will give me clarity. I don't know. I never met him before. I never spoke to him before. He says, they're giving me a runaround. People want clarity. People that are truly, people that are sincere about their service of God, they want someone to give them clarity. And the Alter Rebbe knew that many of the Hasidim were saying to themselves, we are losing our Rebbe to a book. And the book is not going to do it. And the Alter Rebbe in this first half of the introduction is agreeing with them and explaining why they have so much merit and so much value in their complaint about why a book won't do it. He ends off actually the last words of this first half of the introduction. He says, Lefuma de Meshayir B'libei, according to the scope of his heart, as it says in the Zohar, on the verse from Eishes Chayil that we say every Friday night, from Proverbs, from Mishlei, Noida Basha'arim Baila, her husband is known in the gates. What does the Zohar explain on the words Noida Basha'arim Baila, that her husband is known in the gates? Who is the husband? The husband is Hashem. Right? At the giving of the Torah, Matan Torah, God married the Jewish people. We have a union. God is the husband. He's the male, the masculine figure. And we are the feminine. We are the kala. We are the bride. And Noida Basha'arim Baila, when the bride wants to know, Baila wants to know the husband, it's Basha'arim. In plural paths. Paths in the plural. Because there are many Sha'arim. There are many paths. There are many gates. Sha'ar means a gate. There are many gates with which you can go to your husband, that you can go to Baila. Noida Basha'arim Baila, says the Alter Rebbe, like the Zohar explains, there's so many ways to go to the Baal. There's so many ways and to go through the gates to our beloved groom who's waiting to marry us. And if that's the case, back to where we started in the beginning, how is a book going to do this? And it's an incredible question, because very often, and as a Lubavitcher, I can relate to it very much, your Rosh Yeshiva or your Rebbe leave this physical world, and you want to know, am I expected to get guidance from a book? How could you compare it? It's a great question. You want me to read it in a book, or you want me to hear it straight from the source, straight from the Rebbe, from the Rosh Yeshiva himself, talking to me? So the Alter Rebbe makes that question crystal clear. And Be'ezer Hashem Yisbarach, with God's help, next Thursday we will get the answer, where he's going to go the total opposite, explaining why, despite everything we learned today, there's incredible value in this writing of this book, and why he doesn't really want to hear the Chassidim complaining about it, because he has a good reason for why it's being done and how it could work. And by the way, no matter what he's going to say next week, the fact that we're sitting 250 years later and Jews around the world are learning Tanya is the biggest proof that it works. But how it works and why he thought it was going to work and why he believed that this is meant to work, despite everything we said, for that we will, God willing, wait a week. And Be'ezer Hashem Yisbarach, next Thursday, we will do the second half of Akdamas HaMalakit, and then finally the week after, we'll begin Be'ezer Hashem with Perek Aleph, with chapter 1 of this holy, incredible book of Tanya. A good Erev Shabbos. I won't see you before Rosh Chodesh. Have a good Chodesh, a good Shabbos U'Barchim. Don't forget to say the whole Tillim on Shabbos, and we'll see you back here sooner than later. Sei gesund.